I felt it in the room. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. I know a lot of you are here for the first time, and you were so jacked to hear Pastor Chad preach. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you out 15 minutes early. Is that cool with everybody? I'm kidding, bro. I'm kidding. You're not getting out early. But I know where your heart's at. Nah, that's Mike. I know Mike. If you got Job chapter 1, I'll give you a couple more seconds to turn there. I do want to introduce myself if you don't know me. I am Rodney. I've been here since 2016 as a student pastor for your middle and high schoolers, and it's been the honor of my life to serve this church and all the students that have came with it. My beautiful wife is also on the front row, who is 9 weeks from our first child. Isn't that amazing? Yes. So it's an exciting season for our life, but I believe God's got something great for you this morning. I really don't believe you're here by accident. So I believe if you just shut off distractions and tune in to everything he's saying, I believe it's going to make a big impact in your lives and in your hearts. So with that being said, let's do Job chapter 1, and we'll just read the first 18 verses together. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feast in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and his herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself don't lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." As if that wasn't already a bad day, it goes further. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you." Bad day just got worse right there. It keeps going. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and your daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you." Let's talk about processing pain for a few minutes. Let me pray before we do that. Lord, we love you. I thank you for your word that promises that it never returns empty. It never comes back void. Father, what's happening in these moments, the reason we hold so highly your word and we keep it in reverence, Father, is because we know that what's happening today is impacting eternities. Same thing we've already talked about this morning. Eternity is at stake here. Lord, there's pain that's in this room right now. People are walking through it. And it's your word that's life, and it's your word that's healing, and it's your word that can lift us up out of that pit and give us the strength we need to keep going. Your word says that in our weakness, you are made strong. We need that strength here this morning in a mighty way. So, Father, do only what you can do. Take my words and make them words from heaven, Lord, that they would make an eternal impact in someone here today. And we give you all the honor and praise for it in Jesus' name. Help me say amen. Amen. You guys go ahead and be seated. Thank you guys so much for standing a little bit longer this morning. I remember the first house that my family ever bought. When I was born, we lived in a single-wide mobile home, and we were happy about that. But when I was 3 or 4 years old in that ballpark, we got our first new house, which is a huge deal because we was broke, as you already know, based on the first house we lived in. And it also meant that finances began to turn around for us. And I remember when we moved into that house, it seemed like every week, it's like our family celebrated that with us. Because every week, anything that was going on, birthday parties, celebrations, coming to our house to have it. And that's the first time that had ever been a thing, as far as I could remember in my life. And it didn't take but about 3 and 4 months into being there. We're enjoying that season of life. 3 or 4 months into being there, my dad leaves the house, never comes back, car accident, took his life, just like that. In the blink of an eye, we got blindsided by something we never saw coming. And if you look through the life of Job, you see a lot of blindsides going down in his life too, where one week you can be having birthday parties and you could be celebrating, and the next week you can be grieving at a graveside. Something that you never expected happens just like that. Or you maybe bought a new house one year, and the next year you find yourself filing bankruptcy because finances just aren't meeting up anymore. Or maybe there's a booming business and things have never been better, but now you're closing the doors and laying off employees, you can't make payroll anymore. Maybe you have spotless health your entire life, and all of a sudden you're in a season of your life where you can't stay out of the hospital, where it's when one thing breaks down and you get better from it, it's another thing, and it's constant, and it never ends. Maybe you had a happy marriage one time in your life and a house filled with kids and filled with excitement, and there's hope for the future and everything that's to come. Now there's a couple that spends their evenings alone, only thinking about what they've lost over the last couple of years. And it's a blind side that happens. And those things tend to happen often in life. If you've ever been through just one of these things we talked about, one of these things I mentioned, that's painful enough. But if you take all of them together, you get a glimpse into Job's life and everything that he dealt with. And when stuff like this happens, you just don't shake it off. It's not something you just move on from like nothing ever happened. There's a process that we go through where we have questions, where we hurt, where there's pain, where we blame ourselves, where we blame others. We even turn and blame God sometimes in these seasons of life. I need you to know that I'm aware that nobody's process in this room is ever the exact same. We all go through pain and struggles in different ways. But I do have 4 things for everybody in the room this morning. If you would apply these to your own process, I believe that God's going to do a mighty work in our lives. And the first thing is this, we can jump into it. We need to realize the power of the present. Realize the power of the present. The present is like a very unique thing. Why do I say that? Because it's the most common thing and it's the most rare thing all at the same time. It's the most common because it's really all we ever have. It's all we're ever guaranteed is the right here and the right now that we have today. We live in it. We're walking in it right now. Every day we get a glimpse of the present. Yet it's the most rare because usually we spend now preparing for the future or focusing on the past. So we're living in a moment that we're actually not really ever living in for the most part. And this isn't just you. This is in our culture. Like, we're trained to do this. This isn't just our church or somebody you might know. This is a cultural phenomenon right here. I'll give you an example. It was one August. We were gearing up for Tribe Wars, which is our big student event every August. And that's the summer event. It's geared around water and things like that. It's all outside and it's hot. And I go into Walmart and I need 2 things. I'm a student pastor. My shopping list is very small, but very precise. I needed pool noodles and I needed water balloons. Come on, somebody. That's all I needed right there. Pool noodles and water balloons. So I get to Walmart, beginning of August, and I'm looking around. And I can't find a pool noodle or a water balloon at all in this entire Walmart. So I find an associate, and I'm like, hey, help me out. I think I'm just looking in the wrong place. But where's your pool noodles and where's your water balloons at? She's like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. We have rotated out of our summer inventory. We're in fall inventory now. And I'm, what? Dude, it's 95 degrees outside. I don't need a long sleeve shirt right now. I need a pool noodle and I need a water balloon. That's what I need right now. You kidding me? You know what I'm talking about. And then it gets even worse because just this month I was preparing for our Thanksgiving feast with the students, and I go to the Dollar Tree just looking for some decorations. That's all I need. Maybe some leaves to throw out on the table, some real cool looking turkeys to put out for centerpieces, anything, you know. I walk in the Dollar Tree and there are 2 tiny little shelves, probably about the size of this podium, back to back, and all of their Thanksgiving stuff that's left is piled on these two little island shelves. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Most of the store, you know what was out already? Christmas. Look, I love Christmas just as much as the next person, but I didn't need wrapping paper 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I needed turkey decorations and leaves. Come on, somebody. Like, Christmas is great for then, but what about what I need right now? And I'm going to tell you what I told the first service, and I hold to it right now. I know who's to blame for all this business, the overachievers in the house. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Because if it weren't for y'all buying stuff so early, they wouldn't put it out so early. How many of y'all know somebody like that? You got somebody in your family overachieving all the time? Listen, some people, before Halloween is over, you're putting up a Christmas tree. That's too soon. Come on. Some of y'all, November 1, how many, let's poll the room. November 1st, Christmas tree goes up. Anybody in the room? My people, how about day after Thanksgiving, Christmas tree goes up? There we go. That's what I'm talking about. I told you, Kara, that's how it's supposed to be done. She's a pre-Thanksgiving decorator. I'm a post-Thanksgiving decorator. You need to enjoy the Thanksgiving season first. But listen, I'll tell you all that. I'm not harping on you or anything like that, but we do the same things with our lives. Like if we think about it, we use the now, getting ready for the then all the time. We work overtime, 12-hour shifts right now, so they can afford college then. We're putting in all the overtime now so they can have their first car when they turn 16, 10 years down the road. We're doing all that stuff now, so maybe we can have a vacation in July when it comes around. You do all preparation for studying and degrees and sports now to hopefully get an opportunity later on into the future. And one day something might happen like it did to Job. You realize that all those investments of time that you had been making for then mean nothing if the ones you invested for it aren't there to enjoy it with you. Because a lot of times we do that. We spend what's happening right now focusing on how we can get ready for what's going to happen down the road. Listen, Job, he was the guy that everybody wanted to be. He was the envy of the room. He had the family, he was a big family. Everybody seemed happy. He had the money, he had the income. He had everything going for him. But it's interesting when I read Job that while all his kids, it said they were all in the same house having a big feast, celebrating something. Normally when my family gets together, all of them together, it's like a birthday, it's an anniversary, it's something like that. Maybe it's a baby announcement going on. Maybe they're just enjoying time together. But it's interesting to note that Job was not there. Job wasn't there. Because the servant had to run to him and let him know that while he was absent doing other things, there was an accident, and now your 7 sons and your 3 daughters, they're all gone just like that. And Job wasn't there. And I'm betting, I would bet a lot of money. We don't get to see this side of the story, but I'm willing to bet a lot of money that regrets immediately flooded his mind. Maybe he wished he could have been there. Maybe he wished he could have done things different. Maybe he was kicking himself for being gone too much. But the truth is, Job was a businessman. Job was an entrepreneur. Job had a lot of employees, and that life takes a particular investment of your time. And I wonder how many times Job let the phrase, if I could just, take over his life. Anybody ever been there before? If I could just put a couple of extra shifts in, then we could afford something great. My family could take advantage of something like this. If I could just get the job finished, if I could just work a little bit later today. And it reminds me of Moses. And I know Pastor Chad preached a little bit about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. I want to give you some background that he didn't cover last week. Because Moses went through this exact same thing. In Exodus 3, God's people, they'd been enslaved to Egypt for hundreds of years. And God shows up to Moses in a burning bush. Anybody remember this story I'm talking about? He shows up to him in a burning bush. And he says, Mo, you are my guy. You're about to go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And there's going to be an exodus that happens. And you're the one to step up and be bold enough to let me operate through you. And you would think with a miracle going on that was going on, with a flaming bush, talking to Moses, God speaking out of it, you'd think that'd give him all the confidence that he needs to go get the job done. But instead, Moses, he responds with his focus on what he doesn't have yet. Well, who am I to go and talk to Pharaoh. If I could just have a name that carried a little bit more weight with it, maybe things would go a little bit smoother. Maybe they wouldn't laugh me out of the room. Well, if I could just have the answers to every question that they ask me in advance, do a little studying, ain't nothing wrong with a little study up, maybe then everything would go smoother. Well, if I could just know, God, that they would believe everything I was saying, if I could just know that, then I'm your guy. Well, I stutter a little bit when I talk. Maybe if I could just be a better communicator, if you could sharpen that part of me real quick, maybe then it'll be a little bit better of an idea for me to go. And in the middle of all those questions, I want to read Exodus 4, chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. Moses said, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me and say the Lord didn't appear to you? It's as if in verse 2, God stops them. Has God ever shut you up before, like all of your excuses, all of your reasons why, and then all of a sudden he just gives you a word that hits you right in the mouth? This is what happened with Moses right here. Because in the middle of his questions, God stops him. And he says, what is in your hand? Spoiler alert, the only thing in the guy's hand was a stick. That's all. Nothing special about a stick. This is my brain. I'm going to let you in how I study and what I'm thinking through. I couldn't help but like the OG State Farm commercials came to my mind. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Where it's the guy sitting at the office cubicle and the guy's wife thinks he's talking to another girl late at night on the phone. You know what I'm talking about? And she says, what are you wearing, Jake from State Farm? What does he say? Khakis. Everybody knows it. Y'all act like y'all ain't never seen that. Khakis. I feel like Jake from State Farm is like, what does that got to do with anything? I'm just trying to sell you some insurance. But I feel like Moses felt the same way. He's got this big task ahead of him. They've been enslaved for hundreds of years. This isn't just a stop and go, tell them God wants his people back and Pharaoh's just going to let loose like that. No, this is a bigger issue than that. And God stops Moses and says, what is in your hand? And Moses, I feel like he's like Jake. He's like, a stick? I mean, like, what do you want from me? I got a stick. And God said, throw it on the ground. Throw it on. In other words, God said, that is all I need from you right now. Don't miss this. The thing that you need more than anything right now in your life is not a if I could just have later on down the road. The thing you need more than anything, God has already given you. So I need you to listen to two angles of this real fast. It's twofold. The first part comes before you ever experience pain in your life. And you need to take note of this, and I'm going to say it twice because somebody asked me to say it twice since it's not on the screen. Write it on your neighbor's forehead. Do whatever it takes to get this thing etched in your house. Don't allow what you are always reaching for then to rob you of experiencing the fullness of what you already have now. Let it settle for a second, then I'm going to say it a second time, just because I told them I would. Don't allow what you're always reaching for then to rob you of experiencing the fullness of what you already have now. How does that look practically? Dad, there's always a project to do at the house. Maybe this time when you get home from work, put down the tool belt and pick up the football. Realize there's a boy that's watching every move that you make. Mom, I know COVID has done crazy things with our jobs and some of us are still working from home. Maybe it's time to quit putting a couple extra hours in on the computer every day and look up and realize that there's a son or a daughter growing up right in front of you here, right now, in this moment. Maybe you're tired after work. I'm tired after work. That's okay. But maybe it's time, instead of you go to the recliner in the football game, maybe it's time that you take her out on that date that you've been promising week after week after week, because I promise you the game and the recliner are never going to measure up to the gift that God has given you and your spouse. And as you keep putting it off for later and later and later, you don't realize that what we have right now is really all we need for God to do big things in our lives and in our families and in our marriage. And the second part comes in the thick of pain. Maybe pain has already set in. Maybe loss has already set in your life. This note is for you. Don't allow the pain from what's lost destroy the joy of what remains. I'll say that again. Don't allow the pain from what's lost destroy the joy of what remains. If anybody had an excuse to grieve for the rest of their life, you know who it was? Job. He had 1,000,001 reasons to grieve for the rest of his life. I'm sure he's got thoughts like, how am I going to get through this? It hurts too bad. And I imagine God talking to Job the same way he talked to Moses. And in the middle of all of his questions, God whispers, Job, what do you have? What do you have right now? What's right in front of you? In which Job would have answered, well, I got a wife that still loves me. I got a God that's still not left me. And I imagine God stopping him right there. That's what I need right there. I want to use that right there. God asked Moses, what do you have now? He didn't ask Moses, what do you want to have later? What do you wish you had from the past here with you right now? He said, what do you have now? Some of y'all need to get this. The biggest miracles come from realizing the power of what you presently have right now. Look at somebody and say, you got it right now. You got it right now. I'm not up here telling you shouldn't be preparing. Obviously, we work to make a paycheck, to pay the bills, to pay mortgage payments. I'm not telling you to quit preparing for anything. But if you spend all of your time in the then and you neglect the now, then you've gotten this thing wrong. And you're missing the magic and the miracle of what God has presently given you right now. Second thing is this. The presence of pain does not reflect the absence of God in your situation. Amen. The presence of pain does not reflect the absence of God. You know, after Job lost his kids, some of y'all have lost some kids. That feels like rock bottom. I'm pretty sure you're imagining there's nothing that could be worse than what the pain I'm feeling right now feels like. But then Job got so sick that his flesh literally started decaying off of his body. He didn't just lose his kids, he lost his health. Started rotting off of, he got a flesh-eating bacteria. We don't know exactly what disease it was, but we knew his skin was decayed. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, he had some friends show up to tell him why all of it was his fault to begin with. You want to talk about putting salt in a wound. You ever had a friend that told you something you didn't need to hear in a moment where you needed to hear something? Just want to punch them right there in the eye. Look, I'm human too. I mean, the pastor said he could punch them. Yeah, I felt that way sometimes. Like the nerve of them saying what they said in a moment of my hurt, in a moment of my pain right now. His friends showed up and put him on blast. And they said, this is all your fault to begin with. And with all that pain going on, we get a glimpse at what it did in the mind of Job. And he's referencing God in this scripture I'm about to read, and it comes from the Good News translation. And I know y'all don't all read that translation, but when y'all preach one day up here, y'all can use your translation. But today we're going to use this translation because I like the way it worded some things, all right? Job 23:3, this is Job addressing God in the middle of all of his pain. He said, how I wish I knew where I could find him. How I wish I knew how to go where he is. And then you skip down to verse 8. And it says, I've searched in the east, but God, he's not there. I've searched in the west, but I hadn't found him there. God has been at work in the north and the south, but I still haven't seen him. In other words, where is God in all of this? Where was he when I lost my babies? Where was he at when my business fell through? Where was he at when I had to lay off all the employees? Where was he at when I got sick? Where was he at in the hospital room? Where was he at when my friends, so-called friends, all turned their back on me? And here's what the enemy does. He will use pain to convince you that God is nowhere to be found in this thing. He will twist it like a knife so that you believe that you are alone in this life that you're going through. And this is exactly what he had done in Job's situation. But then I go back to Moses. When God was talking to Moses, he said, go to Pharaoh and tell them to let my people go. And this has two parts as well, because there's one thing talking to Pharaoh. It's another thing Moses showing up and talking to a people that have been in slavery for 400 years and saying something like, God's ready to bring you out of this. I don't know which one he feared most. Both of them were daunting tasks. Moses, I'm sure he had a question like, God, you talking about the same people that's been up in there for 400 years? Like, not 100, not 200, not like 400 years. You're talking about the same people who never knew God like great-great-great-great-grandpa did. You're talking about those people. You're talking about the same people that are probably convinced that there is no God of Israel at all anyways. You're talking about those people. Yes, Mo, I'm talking about those people. These are the people that I'm talking about. Well, okay, if you're talking about those, give me some ammo here. Who am I supposed to say sent me? Who am I supposed to say sent me so that they believe what I'm telling them? He said, it's easy. You tell them, I am sent you. And here's why that's significant. Don't miss this. Here's why it's significant. Because these people have only ever heard stories about who God was back then. That's all they ever had to go on. It's hard for them to even dream about who God might ever be in the future. So when they hear the words, I am, it's going to be a game changer for them. Not I was, not I'm going to be. I am here right now. Not the God of Abraham, not the God of Isaac, not the God of Jacob that you've all been telling stories about. I'm your God in the middle of this thing with you. And some of you, you're in painful seasons of your life right now. And the only thing you got when it comes to the Lord to go on is some stories about how grandmama and mama made it through back in their day and the goodness of God in their lives. That's the only thing you got to go on. And listen, you might remember how mama prayed when grandma died and the Lord held her up and you saw her make it through that season. You may still remember daddy crying out to the Lord when he couldn't provide for the family anymore and God needed to show up. And you know what happened? God showed up. But stories and memories aren't going to carry you through your pain. If that's all you got is a what God used to be and who he was back then, it's not going to lift you up out. It's not going to be comfort when you need it. It's not going to be peace that surpasses all understanding. God has a goodness that you need to know today. And his word for you today is not I was, not I'm going to be. His word for somebody in this room today is I am. I am in the loss. I am in the grief. I am in here in all the questions. Well, how do you know, Pastor Rodney? How do you know it? How can I trust that? Because right after Job asked all the questions, it's like the Holy Spirit dropped the answer right in his lap. You ever been battling with the Lord and you had so many questions and all of a sudden he gives you a rhema word, an answer right when you needed it in that moment of your life? This is what happened with Job, Job 23:10. After he comes out of the north, south, east, west, he's not there. And I feel like there should have been a big comma, a couple of periods, like a lot of hesitation between these two verses. Sometimes you got to imagine that that's there. Because I feel like before Job said what he says next in verse 10, there was a lot of contemplation. There was a lot of nights spent in prayer. There was a lot of moments in pain where he was just wrestling with God with all these questions and he didn't have answers for them. And all of a sudden, in the middle of his questions about where God's at, it's like he answers his own question. Said, you know what? I might not know where God is. But verse 10, yet God knows every step I take. Job said, even though I don't know where he is, he knows where I am. Even though I've got questions, he's still with me in the middle of this thing. He knows every step I take. And if he knows every step you take, then he knew you would be here on November 28th, 2021, in a moment where you needed to hear him more than you've ever needed to hear him in your life. And he had you in this moment so you could hear his words into your situation. I am, and I'm here right now. I'm not far off. I'm not stuck in the past. I'm right here, right now. But truthfully, some of you still won't be convinced. Some of you still don't believe it, and that's okay because you're not alone. Because when Moses actually had to address the people in Exodus 6, check out what happens. Let's go to that story, Exodus 6, verse 6 through 9. It says, so God's still telling them, tell the Israelites that I say to them, I am the Lord, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to set you free from slavery to the Egyptians, I'm going to raise my mighty arm to bring terrible punishment upon them, I'm going to save you, I'm going to make you my own people, I will be your God. You will know that I'm the Lord your God when I set you free from slavery in Egypt. I will bring you to the land that I promised to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you. So now he's bringing their past to the present. I'm going to give it to you as your own possession. I am the Lord. And this next part is so crucial that you get. Moses told this to the Israelites. And where you'd think there'd be a party, there'd be a celebration, check out their response. It said, but they would not listen to him because their spirit had been broken by their cruel slavery. Can I tell you something you may already know? Sometimes the sound of our pain drowns out the voice of the Lord in that situation. Sometimes it's so heavy. It's not that we don't want to listen to God. We literally can't because the pain is so much. This is where the Israelites were at right here. The King James said that they didn't listen to Moses for anguish of spirit. And when a commentator I read broke that down, he said this anguish was such a severe pain that it literally prevented them from breathing properly. It was like the child, is hurting. You know the difference in a child like whining and a child like, oh, they're really hurt. You know what I'm talking about? It's like the child that's really hurting and they're sobbing uncontrollably, and in the middle of that, they're gasping for breath. This is the pain that the King James talks about when it talks about this anguish of spirit. Their spirit had been so broken by the pain that they had been living with, they couldn't hear anything else. And my question for you this morning, how loud is your pain right now? What is it? What level are you at right now? Because God, I promise, He's trying to speak to you. But sometimes your pain is at an all-time high, and it's not that you don't want to hear Him, it's just that there's this uncontrollable pain and there's this sobbing in your spirit in the middle of it, and you can't hear anything above that. But can I tell you this, number 3, as you process your pain, the authenticity of your faith is revealed in the way you respond to that pain. The realness of your faith is revealed in how you're going to respond to that pain. Here's the truth. Your spirit may feel broken. You might feel hopeless. You may feel like it's easier to call it quits altogether, but you still choose what happens next in your story. The enemy can bring a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, and he can twist the knife, but he can never take away the choice that you have in this season of your life. And you can choose to go one way or the other. And I've never seen this on display more than my freshman year of college. I had just left my home church, and as I was on the way out, we got a new pastor visit our church. Little did we know he was going to take over as the lead pastor of our church. And it couldn't have been 3 months into him being there. He got up on stage one morning, and he said, "Man, church, I've got this nagging cough, and it just won't go away. Would y'all just pray with me for healing on that thing?" We're like, "Yeah, no big deal, that's fine." And it didn't go away. And he comes up, he's like, "I got a doctor's appointment about this nagging cough. Would y'all pray with me about this doctor's appointment?" And he's fully expecting to go to the doctor to get an antibiotic, like just to clear up this infection that's causing this croup, only to show up to the doctor and get a report of lung cancer. Never smoked a day in his life, and he gets a report of lung cancer. And he comes back and he tells the church, and it's one of those things, like you ever been there where you hear something, but it's like you already know God's gonna win. God's gonna overcome that. God's gonna heal it. You know what I mean? And that's how we felt. The whole church felt this way. God's gonna heal that. Yeah, we're hearing he's got cancer, but God's gonna heal that. No big deal. Or why would God bring him from a place that they had spent the majority of their life, the majority of their ministry, to a church where he could, within a year's time, develop cancer and lose his life? That doesn't make sense. So in our minds, we're thinking, God's got this. And then months went by and treatments go by. And we start getting positive reports. Things are looking up. And the doctors got to this one part of the journey, and they said, "You know what? We got this thing. We got it cornered. And we believe if we do a double round of chemotherapy, it'll knock the rest of it out. It's going to be hard on your body. Your immune system is going to be shot. But we believe if we go ahead and do this right now, we'll get it all." So his family gets together. They really, truly believe this was the thing to do. They give him the double round of chemotherapy. His immune system's trashed. Can't fight off anything. And in that same next few days, with his immune system at its lowest, he developed pneumonia, and he was gone within a week. Leaving a church with way more questions than they had answers. At this point, I'm only 2 years deep into my faith. I've got way more questions than I've got answers. I was hurt. I was confused. I was lost in the middle of all that. And if I was feeling that way, surely his wife, his son, and his daughter that he left behind, surely they're feeling some kind of way themselves. Surely there's a lot of hurt. Surely there's a lot of unanswered questions that are going on in their lives. But we get to the funeral. And the first song that they sang at this man's funeral was that song, Healer. Y'all know that song? Like 2007, something like that. And for me, it was more frustrating for them to have sang that song than any other song, because what we prayed for didn't happen. How are we going to sing about God being a healer when our pastor, who we thought was going to be healed from this thing, is laying in that casket at the front of this church? How are we supposed to believe in a God that's a healer when that stuff's going on? And a teenage Rodney struggling and battling with those questions. And as we're singing that song, as everybody in the room was seated, I'm sure dealing with the same questions I had. Everybody in the room seated. His wife and his daughter and his son stand up on the front row, and they begin to worship the Lord in the middle of it. What? And that gave me even more questions. I'm like, what is that? What is going on right here? And then I remember Job, when he lost his kids, then he lost his health, as if it wasn't bad enough. His wife, he had a wife that was still with him. She went through the same loss he did. This is a hurting mom. This is a hurting wife watching her husband go through this sickness. And she'd had enough. She'd reached her breaking point. And she said, how are you still maintaining your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die? Whereas everybody around would have applauded, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. God's nowhere in this thing. That's what the enemy wants you to do. But Job steps up. He says, foolish woman. He said, is faith only loving God when things are going good? Is faith only loving God when life is going the way we want it to go? He said, surely God's still God even in the pain. Surely he's still Lord even in the hurt. Surely even if you don't got the answers, he's still sovereign. Surely the God we serve isn't limited to the life that we want to live and the life that we want to see come through along the journey. Surely he's bigger than that. And I'm thinking, what is that? That's the same thing I saw at a funeral when a mom and a daughter and a son all stepped up and they worshiped in the midst of loss. And God quickened my spirit in studying for this thing. He's like, listen to me, Rodney. That's not a crazy thing that they're doing right there. That's not an oxymoron. What it is it's faith on display. It's real faith. It's the substance of what we're hoping for, even when everything else feels hopeless. That there's more to this life than what we're seeing right here. That God is faithful. And it's as if Job looked at his wife and says, you know what? If you can make the choice to curse God and die, then you can still make a choice to bless God and live in the middle of this thing that you're going through right here, right now. It's a choice that you have. There's room for questions. There's room for pain. There's room to hurt. There's room to call out to God and ask all of those things. Here's what there's not room for. There's not room to quit on. There's not room to lay it down. Because when we come to faith in the Lord and what he does in our heart, it teaches us one massive thing that we've already heard this morning. This life that we're living is over just like that. It's temporary. But there's an eternity at stake. And surely we can't let the pain from something temporary. We can't allow the enemy to rob something that's eternal out of that pain. It can't be what we allow to happen. Your posture towards God in your pain is the most accurate reflection of authentic faith. If the band could come on out and help me close this thing, I got one more point for you. If you ask, you know what? How do you stay faithful through all that? It hurts too much. How do you stay faithful when you got more questions than answers? Because of this last point right here. Pain in God's hands always produces purpose in God's time. Pain in God's hands always produces purpose in God's time. I don't know if you caught it or not, but the thing that took out Job's kids, 7 sons, 3 daughters, just like that, the Bible said it was a whirlwind. If you fathom that, what we would think of as a tornado. Hit their house, destroyed everything, took out his family. Job spends 40 chapters. We don't know how long of a time span that was. It could have been months. It could have been years. We don't know how long it was. Battling with his friends, battling with questions, battling with things he didn't have answers to. And God finally shows up and speaks to him. But do you know what God spoke to him in the middle of? The thing he heard God's voice from is a whirlwind. The very same thing that took out his family is the thing God chose to speak to him in. The thing that would take him back to all the hurt, all the pain, all the memories of God being nowhere, God having no part of this. All the memories where the enemy had tricked him into thinking God was nowhere in this thing. That's what God chose to speak to him out of. I'll never forget what it felt like to lose a dad at a young age. That kind of thing kind of etches into your memory as a little as a little man at 4 years old. I'll never forget the fallout from that. Mom couldn't handle the loss, battling depression over it. Turned to pills to try and cope with the depression. That turned into abuse. Spent a lot of my childhood wondering if she was going to be home sober or not. Met my stepdad shortly after my dad passed. And I resented him, not for anything he did. I was just mad from what happened to Dad. Only thing he ever did was sacrifice for my family. Take a mom in that already had 2 kids and love them. That's respectable. I shouldn't have hated him for that. I was just dealing with pain. Remember when he had a heart attack, he was the only income in our house. Spent a year out of the game trying to recover from it. Lost all our income, couldn't pay bills, lost our house, bounced back and forth for years from home to home because we couldn't make ends meet. I remember that. Remember my sister, she was the rock of the family. Year and some change older than me. She had had enough. So my brother, I'm 16 at this time, my brother's 9. She said, I'm gone. She moves out. At this point, my stepdad had been arrested, spent a year in jail. So it's my mom, who's still struggling with depression, me, and my little brother. That's it. I remember how that felt. And I had way more questions than I had answers, church. And I asked God why for years. But I held him close, believing that there was an answer that I hadn't heard yet. And it wasn't until 2013 at my first student ministry in Rennes, Georgia, where God gave me an answer. The loss, the hurt, the addiction, that was all my whirlwind. Y'all got different whirlwinds. But God spoke to me and revisited all that pain I went through in the lives of students in my first ministry and still today. And I can't make it up how clear it was. I had students that came to me and said, Pastor Rodney, I just lost my father. I don't know how we're going to make it through this. I'm not making this up. Another student, my mom's battling depression, struggling with medication. My family's hurting. I don't know how we're going to make it through this. This is when it gets freaky. Another one came, had a sister a year older than him. He said, I don't know what we're going to do. My sister had enough. She's moving out. She's gone. It's just me, and he had a little brother. And it's in that moment where I felt God speak out of their whirlwind. And he said, here's your answer. But tell him how I never left you. Tell him how I was with you through it all. Tell him how in moments you didn't know how you were going to be provided for. You prayed and I answered those prayers. Tell him that. So I got to minister and still do today. Minister to students that are going through the same exact whirlwind that I did. That's the purpose. Sitting around a small group of people and the hurt that you went through 10 years ago, they're going through right now. How God held you up 10 years ago is the testimony they hear right now so that they can believe God's in it with them too. And we get a little glimpse into Job's future. You fast forward all the way to the end, James 5:11. James says, as you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. Look at this last part. Even though you can't feel it right now, the Lord is compassionate and merciful. A lot of you, your biggest hurdle to go to the next level God needs you to be at is the fact that you still blame him for everything that happened back then. Here's the truth. You can spend the rest of your days blaming God for everything that's happened in your past, or you can start today believing God that there's a purpose for it in the future. Would you stand up with me all over the room?
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hope that the message was a blessing to you and an encouragement to you. If it was, we'd just like to take a few more seconds of your time and ask you to do a few things. First of all, if you don't mind, there's a digital connection card that you could submit and send our way, and it'll let us stay connected to you more personally. First, it'll let us know who you are. Second, how frequently you tune in. And also, there's a place for prayer requests, and we would love to partner with you and pray about what's going on in your life. The second thing that would be great is if you could just take a moment, click a link, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can stay connected with what's going on at the Pointe every week. And also, man, if this was a blessing to you today, it might be an encouragement and a blessing to somebody in your friend group or in your network of influence. So why don't you just share this video and pray that God uses it to encourage them as well. Finally, if you'd like to consider blessing this ministry financially, there's a giving link at the bottom. You can click down there, and that'll help us continue to throw out videos like this that could be a life changer for somebody out there. So guys, thank you again for joining us. We're so blessed that you did. We're so honored to have you as a part of our online family. And we want you to know one more thing. We love you so much, and we can't wait to see you next time.